So we do have one stream game already up, so I'm going to hop us into that one. It's your favorite Oreo versus Zelu. I wanted to say Zelu, but I think Zelu's more appropriate. So we've got Zelu versus your favorite Oreo, opening up with the TF Swain, personal favorite of mine. Really contemplating getting rid of this Dreadway deckhand. Looks like a Karma Lux on the side of Zelu. Didn't get to see the champion lineup. It's possible that it's Deny Bannerman, but I'm going to go under the assumption that it's... I can find the deck list. Why am I going under assumptions? Zelu, Zelu, Zelu. What is in your lineup? Ah, good. Everybody was infinitely better about giving us Mobilytics deck lists instead of deck codes this week, so it's so much easier for me to find... Okay, it is Karma Lux. So much easier for me to find their decks this time around. Okay, so it looks like... Wait, that's not right. Alright, but it is Karma Lux. That's the one I was getting. I was trying to find their other deck list, then probably to someone else's page. Mobilytics can be a little finicky sometimes, but I'm going to see a pretty slow early game on the side of both players. A couple of non-aggressive 2-drops coming out, the Dreadway deckhand and the Eye of the Dragon. Eye of the Dragon, not too difficult to remove in this matchup, which is, I think, why we see the block come out, especially with the barrel. There's really not a lot of things to stop the barrel on the side of Karma Lux, so any 2-damage spell is going to kill this. The only thing this really opens it up to that it wasn't open to before is Make It Rain. But we do see the Death's Hand in favorite Oreo's hand, so definitely going to wait to commit that until Zelu fires off a couple of spells. Really just commits more things to making the Dragonling. It will be the Salvage fired off, actually, getting rid of a Noxian Guillotine and a Noxian Fervor. Picking up a Zap Sprayfin and another Salvage. There is... So with the Twisted Fate in hand, that's a lot of draw power. That is 6 draw cards, or 6 cards drawn, rather, in the hand of Oreo between the 2 Zap Sprayfin and the 2 Salvages. So we could see a Twisted Fate upgrade come out, especially since 2 of them are burst speed. It'd have to be like a pretty preemptive Will of Ionia onto the Twisted Fate in order to actually prevent that. And it's definitely not unreasonable that we see TF come out this turn. Oh, I think we definitely see TF come out here. Oh, so it's a little awkward because the red card here doesn't actually like take advantage of the barrel as much as you would like, but I do think it is your best play. You don't have a great blocker for the 4/4 Badger Bear either. Like, you would love to, you know, get this red card down after you'd already blocked, so that was probably a consideration. But I don't think it actually makes too much of a difference. Either way, it's pushing 2 damage onto the Badger Bear. So it feels like there's not a lot of a difference, but of course, it does feel bad to use removal on Grizzled Ranger. Might even just take the damage. No, it's going to block with a deckhand. I don't think there's a major difference here. It does make it a little bit easier to clean up, especially since you do have the Death's Hand. But it's looking like something like a Zap Sprayfin on the following turn from Oreo does set him up for a good amount of mana into the following turn, a TF draw, as well as a good blocker for this Badger Bear. I think one of the reasons that I like the TF Swain deck so much is because of the Zap Sprayfin. I think this is a card that a lot of people saw and were like, that's like everything I want in a card. This is like, you know, the new Shadow Assassin. It's just in a different region. And it really has performed very well in the niche spaces that it actually finds itself in. It's just, there aren't a lot of like mid-rangey type Bilgewater decks. It's mostly things like Twisted Fate Lee Sin, but if you're not running like a lot of cheaper spells, then I could see it becoming an issue for you. There have definitely been a couple of times where I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm a control deck. I should run Zap Sprayfin, and then I actually get around to looking at what I've got in there, and there's only like 1 spell that costs 3 or less. So we do see the Karma come down. I don't think there's really any protection for this. Yeah, I'm not seeing any 3-mana protectors for this Karma, no prismatic barriers or anything like that, which means it's a little more likely that the answer would be to single combat the Twisted Fate, which gets the TF off board. Of course, Zelu is not, or Zelu rather, is not aware of like how much draw power is in Oreo's deck. The other consideration could just be that you feel this Karma is actually pretty safe. Noxian Fervor is the only card that eliminates it outright. It would have had to be deckhand into this Death's Hand. So it's definitely like a very reasonable Karma play there. There's not a lot in your opponent's deck that actually answers it. Of course, we do see Oreo just kind of lining up the answers really well here. And it is worth noting that Oreo is in a bit of trouble if we do see a Lux come down. Doesn't have a great answer for that. Guillotine not going to be an option in one of these earlier turns. But with this Twisted Fate at 2,
Let the light guide you.
I think a Zap Spray Fin here actually levels the Twisted Fate next turn if you go for double salvage. And with Zap Spray Fin, you will have 3 spell mana going into the next turn. It doesn't give him any other options in terms of things to play on that turn with the leveled Twisted Fate, but I think just getting the leveled Twisted Fate is... Okay, the Make It Rain is actually really big here. That does give him something to do on the following turn. It would only be a blue card. It's pretty likely that we just see him bank the spell mana, and it's also pretty likely that we see the Twisted Fate die through something like a Final Spark. But I do think that getting your Twisted Fate leveled is extremely valuable. That is a card that is very difficult to deal with, and since we are still 1 turn off of the Leviathan... Ooh, interesting to me that we're seeing the TF attack, or a lot of these attacks, actually. This is the Unyielding Spirit turn, something that you have to be cognizant of. There is 1 Unyielding Spirit in the deck. Yeah, we're going to see the block onto the Twisted Fate. I would love to see... Oh! As much as I don't like playing for the Twisted Fate level up, I do think that when the option presents itself to you, it is an extremely valuable resource for winning the game. But instead, it's going to be a setup for the Execute, and I feel like you didn't have to attack with the Twisted Fate to get that done. Well, now we even see Karma coming down. I think this means that we have to see Swain into Noxian Guillotine. But there is Deny Mana for Zelu. I would have loved to see that Twisted Fate upgrade. Especially if Karma was going to be the follow-up from Zelu. I think Zelu's entire turn would have had to change, because if Oreo upgrades the Twisted Fate there and doesn't attack with it, you know, maybe the Lux is still at full health, but you can TF into a red card next turn anyway. Your opponent's really pressured to get something out. I don't think you can just let your opponent untap with a Karma and a Lux, though. It's possible that Oreo wants to set up a Make It Rain this turn to set up the double Guillotine next turn. It does still get blown out by a Deny, since you will not get the fleeting Noxian Guillotine again afterwards, since the first one was canceled. So this is a little dicey. And it's just going to be a pass from Oreo, wanting to set up for a better play next turn. I'm a little surprised he didn't at least fire off the Make It Rain. There are health potions in the deck of Zelu as well, which will turn off the Guillotine play. So it's possible that he wanted to go for the Guillotine play, and then if a health potion comes out as the answer onto the Lux, then you can respond with a Make It Rain. Had that option last turn as well, of course, but wouldn't have had the second Guillotine after the fact if everything does go according to plan. And now we see the big mana commitment of the Remembrance, leveling up the Lux, granting him that Final Spark. Oopsie. Swiftwing Lancer is a pretty good pickup here. Going to push damage onto the Swain and actually make it killable by the Final Spark. And there is no answer for that on the side of Oreo. As much as he'd like to develop Leviathan this turn, I do not think you are at a point where you can allow your opponent to just sit there with a Lux and a Karma. And now, with a third unit on the board, there is a chance that if you go for the Guillotine and then the Make It Rain to play around the health potion, that you just miss the Lux. Of course, this does draw Ravenous Flock. Now, I've never actually seen Ravenous Flock played onto a unit that was then health potion and healed up to full. I would assume that it fizzles similarly to Noxian Guillotine. And yeah, here we are going to see the challenge onto the Swain, followed by the final spark. No answer for this. The scariest part for for Oreo here rather, is that if the guillotine does come down onto the Lux and there is a health potion to cancel that out, then there is still Will of Ionia mana for this Leviathan. Alright, we do see the Make It Rain. A little bit of a miss. The 1 damage onto the Lux doesn't feel super impactful since the health potion will still heal her up to full. You would have liked to see that onto the Karma to set up for better executes next turn. And I do think you have to try and get rid of this Karma next turn. If your opponent is allowed to hang on to an upgraded Karma, especially if the Lux is still on board, then heaven to Betsy, you are in for a rough one. But we see the Make It Rain to upgrade the Swain. It does feel a little unfortunate that you hit the Swiftwing Lancer in this spot, just because it was going to die anyway because the Swain was upgrading. Ravenous Flock looks like an answer onto the Lux, but you definitely know that your Swain is dying this turn. Would love to hang on to that second Swain. 2 Leviathans are cool, but they're not double Swain cool. Yeah, thinking real hard about this Ravenous Flock. And now these, the salvages are just sitting dead in hand. It's very difficult once you get into these later turns and you want to be slamming down Leviathans and Swains, and your opponent already has out this Lux and this Karma. It's very difficult to find time to actually play your draw spells. Now, if we had upgraded our Twisted Fate with it... Trying to remember what else he even actually did that turn. I think it was developing a Swain post-combat? If I remember correctly.
The order rewards its faithful.
Yeah, there's nothing left to do on the side of Oreo. He's just going to have to pass. But if there's no Will of Ionia in the hand of Zelu, then we actually could see the double Leviathan take over the game and end it out here. If we just see... So currently, if there's absolutely no answer in the hand of Zelu, and we see this Leviathan attack, either one of these units blocks it. Zelu goes down to 6, and then the second Leviathan is lethal. But that's only if your opponent has absolutely nothing, which of course, not going to be the case in a Demacia Ionia deck. Does have the Will of Ionia this time around, gets that off the board. And now Oreo has no board and has to, absolutely cannot let this Karma Lux sit around. You have to get rid of one, preferably both, but I'm not seeing a way to actually get rid of the Karma in this situation. Is going to be the Swain. I'd prefer the Ravenous Flock to the Execute because there is a tough unit on your opponent's field. Yeah, looks like the Ravenous Flock's going to come down first. I don't think it actually makes a huge impact. There's nothing that you can do. If you Ravenous Flock this Lux, the only answer your opponent can have is Health Potion, and the Noxian Guillotine would not help you in that situation. But we're going to see the Zap Spray Fin come out first, gets us a Make It Rain. This is probably one of the worst worst times to get a Make It Rain. It's just really, really unimpactful. It will get damage down onto the Karma, which is nice to set up for the Guillotine, so maybe that's something. But honestly, with the Radiant Guardian down and Oreo not having a clean answer to it... Oh, and we do see the Health Potion onto the Lux, which I think even cancels out the entire damage of Ravenous Flock. Yeah, that is the case. I've never seen that interaction before. That's kind of how I assumed it would work based on how Noxian Guillotine works. And now it's going to be a random spell created by Karma. This Karma created more than a couple random spells. And I definitely think in this grindier matchup, Oreo is definitely letting this slip away from him. Now with the upgraded Lux and Karma out, you have to think that the game is all but over. An Arachnoid Sentry picked up. Yeah, there's a chance to get down Leviathans, but with the double Final Sparks starting to come out, those are actually pretty easy to clean up. We might as well see the Swain block onto the Karma, try and get that off board. I like pushing damage onto the Lux over the Radiant Guardian. There's a very good chance that your opponent has the Deny. but I feel like you do have to try to play to win, and you can't play around deny at this point, so you might as well start firing off these Noxian Guillotines. We do see a Spirit's Refuge. That's going to create the final spark. That's going to come down onto the Swain, you would think. Ooh, don't miss. Okay, make it rain hit. Gonna remove the barrier from the Karma. But yeah, like, you would assume the final spark is going to come down onto Swain, which does give you space to play Leviathan if your opponent loses this Karma. Okay, which he does, so the Karma's going to go away. So Oreo should be relatively safe to get down the Leviathan this turn. There are some situations where he's not. Does still have to be cognizant of these. Could also go for the double Noxian Guillotine this turn. Citrus Courier's the hover. Does have an Arachnoid Sentry. And this would protect the Swain from the final spark. Feels like it's a delay of the inevitable, though. This Swain cannot live that long. Considering the Guillotines, we'll lose the Swain for this. It's a tough spot for Oreo to be sure. And with 7 mana, there is still a chance that Zelu plays another 6 mana spell and upgrades this. Actually, I'm not sure there is. I think the only 6 mana spells in the deck... Yeah, so the only 6 mana spell in the deck is Remembrance. And since since Karma died, it will actually only be 5 mana. So there's no opportunity for Zelu to make a final spark using only 1 spell. But there is still a fair amount of 4 mana spells and then single combat, something like that in the deck. Oreo has to make a decision. It looks like it will be the Citrus Courier. Finally, the decision to be made. I can't help but feel... Oh yeah, the Karma coming down does mean that this Swain is not safe from this final spark, and I'd have to assume that this is lethal for Zelu, who will get the attack token again. Or sorry, it'll be Oreo's turn to attack next turn. I got confused because he is lining up attacks, but that was because of the Citrus Courier, thanks to the Make It Rain. But even with the chance to open attack, all the life that has been gained from this Radiant Guardian, I don't think these Leviathans have a very high chance of sticking on the board. We're going to see one of these units die no matter what to the final spark, as well as push through 3 damage onto Oreo. It's pretty reasonable for 1 or 2 more final sparks to come out next turn from Zelu, and that's really the power of the Karma Lux deck. It's very difficult to grind out thanks to the health potions and the Radiant Guardian, just a lot of healing. You can't really get the cheeky burn wins that TF Swain does go for sometimes. Hard to know what would have happened if we did see the double salvage come out into the Twisted Fate upgrade. Obviously, Oreo has not seen a second copy of the card, which likely would have been necessary by this point. Of course, would have been 4 cards deeper, and you absolutely hate to play a control matchup and then watch these draw spells just sit in your hand for the duration of the game. That's another final spark. Not that it's going to matter, as the first final spark will take out the Citrus Courier. And because it is slow, you can't stack both of them on top of each other, which actually would be lethal, as Oreo will be left at 8 after this. But that's not how cards work. And no mana to play a unit to throw it onto, not that he would anyway. And now we don't get to see the open attack from Zelu because it is Oreo's turn, and a third Leviathan is definitely not what you wanted to see. As I said, it feels like there's a very low chance that this actually gets to stick around to the end of the turn between the double final spark or even just another Will of Ionia. Yep, there's the Will of Ionia, and that's going to be a surrender from Oreo. Perfectly understandable. Just a little bit of a rough game. It was definitely put into a few tight spots. And Zelu picks that one up, game number 1. Going into round 2, or game 2 rather, Oreo going to stick with the TF Swain. God, that Bilgewater mark is extremely off-center. I know people talk about how off-center the icons are a lot, but I feel like they're constantly drifting apart from each other. Like every day they just get a little bit further apart. And it will be, ooh, Swain Sejuani out of Zelu. I think we had seen this earlier, if only for a little bit. Came in at the end of one of Zelu's games, if I remember correctly. Let me see if I can pull up the list for this. I missed. I hit the sea monster deck. What do we have here? All right, so it is like a fairly standard Swain Sejuani, which feels like a weird. I don't know that there really is a standard for Swain Sejuani. This one is pretty aggressive, running things like Crimson Disciple, Imperial Demolitionist, Crimson Curator. So it does have a lot of the Crimson packages. It does have Wolf Rider for a ramp. It's actually 90% a Noxus deck, 31 Noxus, 9 Freljord, being Omen Hawk, Sejuani, and Wolf Rider. But of course, Noxus having one of the weaker Allegiance cards in the game, and I feel like it is a little unfortunate that not all Allegiance cards were created equal in Legends of Runeterra. But we're actually going to see Zelu go for the trade rather than the value trade down onto the Spider with the 2/2 Omen Hawk. That does mean the top card of his deck, I believe, is a +2/+2, which is a lot. Okay, but it's not the Crimson Curator. That one is just a 3/3. A 5/5 would have been very difficult to deal with. And the Arachnoid Sentry, just going to stun that one out. This is actually kind of a weird matchup for the Twisted Fate Swain. Crimson units are kind of the bane of Twisted Fate. The red card feels very unimpactful. Gold card doesn't feel great either. You're just constantly giving them advantage. Pretty much all of these have 3 health rather. And yeah, Make It Rain and Make It Rains and Twisted Fates are just not the cards that you want to see in a matchup like this. Oreo going for the open attack. If there's something like an Elixir of Iron to protect this. Okay, so that's actually a pretty good read. You've got a general idea. Okay. I was going to say you've got a general idea that there's no protection in your opponent's hand, at least in terms of Elixir of Iron. Now we see the Imperial Demolitionist come down, and that's where the +2/+2 from the first 2 Omen Hawks went. Big old 4/5. Death's Hand, not a bad pickup, not a great one, as it will have to be a... Ooh, there's a big Swain too. These Omen Hawk hits, very impactful for Zelu. Yeah, and I think Twisted Fate gold carding the Swain might have to be the play. The concern is that you really want this barrel to go on to Make It Rain and actually take out the Crimson Curator. Okay, gonna go for the red card. Decides that this is necessary. Do have a blocker for the Swain. If there's a Death's Hand, then you're in a world of trouble. Although Zelu, pretty far from the Swain upgrade. Does only have 3 out of 12, I believe, from the Imperial Demolitionist. She does push through 3 damage in Swain terms. She deals 1 to the unit, 2 to the face. Zelu gonna fire off a Transfusion, going to damage out that, give the health to the Crimson Curator, and now that's gonna be 2 Crimson units in the hand of Zelu. Or sorry, 3 actually. No, sorry, 2, yeah. So one from the initial hit of the Imperial Demolitionist, and now 1 from the red card. I was a little confused about where the Transfusion had gone.
Clear it out.
These are actually pretty mediocre feeling attacks. There can be a whole slew of blocks from Oreo here. I do like sacrificing the Twisted Fate as well. I think you need this Death's Hand to clear off the Swain. And there's still a good chance that your opponent doesn't have the Elixir of Iron, or they might have used it on the Edwin earlier. Of course, could have been holding it back, could have top decked it. There's a couple of options, but you're pretty confident that your opponent doesn't have something like that. Let's take a look at the removal that's actually available for this Swain Sejuani deck. 3 Death's Hand, 3 Noxian Fervor, and 2 Ravenous Flock. Does mean that you're pretty unlikely to win the game through something like a TF upgrade. I really would have liked to see it block there. Even if you just play it next turn as a blue card, I do think that your hand is in a spot where you would like to get some more draws off. But instead, going to attack with the Twisted Fate, which gets blocked out, does likely mean something coming out. And it's just a Death's Hand. Looks like Oreo is actually contemplating throwing out the pick a card. I think that's a little dangerous given the amount of setup that Zelu could still do this turn. Does have a couple more 2-drops and 1-drops in the deck between the Crimson Disciples and the Imperial Demolitionists, as well as a couple of 3-drops of his own. Wolf Rider could even come down, City Breaker. There's a lot of setup that Zelu could still do this turn, so I do like not firing off the picket card. I think Twisted Fate's a little more impactful. You could even gold card here to kill the Demolitionist. And that will be the case. Zelu kind of low on cards. I didn't get to see if this Crimson Curator was one of the cards created by the original Crimson Curator. So I'm not sure if there are 1 or 2 Crimson units still in Zelu's hand. Ooh, but the Swain pickup. Ooh, the Swain pickup's actually pretty insane here. 4 favorite Oreo. The second Curator is not that impactful in Swain years. So Swain's going to come down. This sets up beautifully for the Leviathan turn next turn. There's no Noxian Guillotines coming out of the deck of Zelu, so there is a good chance that the Swain gets to get off a block and survive this turn. Ooh, Crimson Awakener coming down. That's a pretty impactful one to be made off the Curator, especially when you do have 2 more Curators coming down. Yeah, Oreo hovering the 2 Make It Rains understands that there is a chance that it kills both Curators. You will give your opponent a lot of Crimson units, but since you have the Swain next, or since you have the Leviathan next turn, there's a decent chance that it's actually just not that impactful. Although I think that a block here from both the Swain and the Twisted Fate keeps you at a high enough life total. Ooh, I definitely don't like this. If anything, I'd like to see the Swain block the 5/5. It sets you up for the best Make It Rain. Either that or I want to see a block onto both the Crimson Curators. I definitely think Swain onto Curator and Twisted Fate onto Disciple doesn't... Not Disciple. So many Crimson units, man. He's not even in the deck, so I can't look him up quickly. Crimson Awakener. There we go, yeah. Okay, so back to the point I was making. I'm fine with Swain onto Awakener and Twisted Fate onto one of the Curators, or block both Curators. I think Twisted Fate onto the Awakener would be a lot awkward. This just kind of sets you up for a better Make It Rain. You take a lot of damage onto your Swain, but that just kind of is what it is. It's a little bit of a riskier play. You preserve the life total while risking your Swain instead of risking your life, but since you are getting the second Swain off of the Leviathan, I don't think it's really the end of the world. And as much as Zelu does have a fair amount of Crimson units in hand, that's not enough to get you through Swain Leviathan. Alright, but when your opponent has their own Leviathan, what are you going to do? It's risky. Yeah, I was about to say, it's risky to attack with the Leviathan because your opponent also has Ravenous Flocks. And of course, your Leviathan is much better because you do already have out the Swain. Now, the scary part is that Zelu does have the life advantage. So if both of them just sit here stunning each other's boards until the end of time, that does heavily favor Zelu. Oreo technically has a kill onto the Swain with the Noxian Fervor and the Ravenous Flock. It is a little scary to put your second Swain in danger like that. And the Leviathan is definitely the bigger threat than the Swain currently, as you are 2 turns off of dying to that. As much as the Swain stunning your board hurts. Ooh, double Ravenous Flock. That is a really good pickup here. While your Swain will still be in danger, you need to get this Leviathan off board, and 2 Ravenous Flock is definitely the easiest way to do it. Looks like we are going to see Arachnoid Sentry come down. Would imagine that is going to block the Swain. Or, sorry, stun the Swain. It sets up a very nice blocker onto the Crimson Disciple, because you definitely don't want to have to block this Swain with either your Leviathan or your Swain. Leviathan is definitely your biggest chance to come back into this game, but you do also have to take out the Leviathan this turn, or you set yourself up for lethal by either a Noxian Fervor or just a second copy of Leviathan. It's definitely a scary game to be playing. Ooh, Imperial Demolitionist. You have the answer in the Noxian Fervor, which I do think you have to go for. Going down to 2 is a little bit scary, especially given that there are still transfusions in Zelu's deck. We could see a burst speed 2 damage coming out. And, I mean, so it feels like a pretty snap Noxian Fervor to me. You do still have the opportunity to double Ravenous Flock onto the Leviathan. You have the mana for all of it. It's just a matter of what do you throw your Noxian Fervor onto in terms of your units. You don't want to lose the Arachnoid Sentry because it's your best Swain blocker. You don't want to lose Zap Sprayfin because the life totals are so low that you'll be throwing out Or sorry, the life totals are so low that, you know, the incremental damages from Zap Spray Fin make a big difference. Instead, we see him not do it at all, which does mean that 2 instances of damage come through. Swain and Leviathan are stunned. Ravenous Flock comes down onto Swain. And this is a very dicey situation for Oreo now. I'm very concerned by the situation he finds himself in by not going for the Noxian Fervor onto the Crimson Awakener. Or Crimson Disciple, rather. Now I'm mixing up. Now I can't forget Awakener's name. Now goes for the Fervor onto the Disciple, trading life total for Ravenous Flock. But we do still have to see the second Ravenous Flock come out onto the Leviathan, or Oreo just dies on the spot. There we do see the Flock fizzle from Zelu, the Flock go off from Oreo. Now the second Flock going to come down. And the attack from the Demolitionist going to get blocked out by this Arachnoid Sentry. Just a fair trade. Flock come down now onto the Leviathan, so... Game definitely extremely heavily favored for Zelu, especially given that Oreo's hand is so weak in this double Make It Rain. That is a problem that I found Bilgewater decks to have. Make It Rain feels like such a great early game tool, but if you do find yourself stuck on multiple copies of them in the late game, it can be extremely hard to find value. This deckhand, probably one of the best top decks you could get at this point. Obviously, Swain would have been great, but this does clear out the board pretty nicely and could push through something close to lethal, actually. Oh, this is a heartbreaker if you're a fan of your favorite Oreo, as that will stun out the Leviathan and almost certainly take away any chances of Oreo winning this game. I do think we have to see a Make It Rain fired off here before Zelu has a chance to get down any more units. You cannot afford to have this miss, and it would be nice to take out the Crimson Curator while it only has 2 health, but a pass from Oreo. And now the City Breaker comes down. That's what I was afraid of. You do have to let more RNG line up, but it's also just going to be lethal because the City Breaker does end the game on the spot thanks to the 1 health out of Oreo. And that's going to be Zelu picking this one up 2-0. All right, let me check out the status of our backup streams. We have no backup streams. They have all already finished. Even though it was only a 2-game set, it feels like that one actually went on for a while.